The last text message Seoin Blackwood ever sent was delivered at 11:47 p.m. on a rain-soaked Thursday night in October. 3 simple words that would haunt investigators for months. "He's watching me." Detective Thaddeus Chen stared at the illuminated phone screen in the evidence room, the device's cracked surface reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights above. The message had been sent to Seoin's roommate, Jung-hoon Sarkonian, who hadn't seen it until the following morning. By then, Seoin had vanished without a trace from her apartment on Maple Street, leaving behind only her phone, her purse, and a half-eaten bowl of cereal on the kitchen counter. 23 years old, graduate student at the university, no known enemies, Chen muttered to his partner, Detective Minjun Zircon, as they reviewed the case file for the 100th time. Clean record, close family ties, stable relationship with her boyfriend, Zex Whitmore. This doesn't fit any pattern we know. Minjun adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and pointed to a photograph in the file. What about this surveillance footage? From the apartment complex. The timestamp shows 11:52 p.m., just 5 minutes after her last text. The grainy black and white image showed a figure in dark clothing moving through the parking lot, but the rain and poor lighting made identification impossible. The person appeared to be of average height and build, walking with deliberate steps toward the building's rear entrance. Chen had been working missing persons cases for 15 years, but something about Seoin's disappearance felt different. The young woman had been pursuing her master's degree in forensic psychology, an irony that wasn't lost on the investigators. She studied the minds of criminals, analyzed their behavior patterns, and now she had become the victim of what appeared to be a carefully planned abduction. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry. Seoin's laptop was still open on her desk, displaying a research paper about stalking behaviors and their escalation patterns. Her bed was unmade, suggesting she had been preparing for sleep when something interrupted her routine. The only unusual detail was an overturned plant near the living room window, a large fern that now lay in a puddle of soil and ceramic shards. Jung-hoon had discovered the scene. The next morning, when Seoin failed to meet him for their weekly coffee. "She's never late," he had told the officers, his voice trembling with concern. "Seoin is the most punctual person I know. When she didn't show up, I knew something was wrong." The investigation revealed that Seoin had been experiencing what she described as strange feelings for several weeks before her disappearance. Friends reported that she had become increasingly paranoid, frequently checking over her shoulder and insisting that someone was following her. She had even contacted campus security twice in the month leading up to her disappearance, reporting suspicious activity near her apartment building. "I keep seeing the same person," she had told security officer Raina Ashford during her second visit. "Different clothes, different times of day, but I swear, it's the same person. They're always there when I leave for class, when I come home, when I go grocery shopping." Unfortunately, campus security had found no evidence to support her claims, and no formal report was filed. Now, as Chen and Minjun pored over the evidence, those dismissed concerns took on a chilling significance. The digital forensics team had analyzed Seoin's phone, computer, and social media accounts, finding nothing unusual in her recent communications. Her last phone call had been to her mother in Seoul, 3 days before her disappearance. Her routine conversation about her studies and upcoming graduation plans. As the rain continued to pound against the precinct windows, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that they were dealing with someone who understood how investigations worked. Someone who knew exactly how to make a person disappear without leaving a trail. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into the investigation, when Detective Chen received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Kellen Morse, Seoin's academic advisor. The professor's voice carried an urgency that immediately caught Chen's attention. "I've been going through Seoin's research files," Dr. Morse explained, "and I found something that might be relevant." She was working on a case study about a particular type of stalker, someone she called the Phantom Watcher. The details are ... disturbing. Chen and Minjun met Dr. Morse at the university that afternoon. The professor led them to assigned graduate student office, a cramped space filled with psychology, textbooks, and research papers. On her desk, they found a thick folder labeled Project Umbra, Advanced Stalking Behaviors. Ion had been studying cases where stalkers managed to maintain surveillance of their victims for extended periods, without detection. Dr. Morse explained. She was particularly interested in cases where the stalker eventually escalated to abduction, or worse. The folder contained detailed profiles of 12 different cases from around the country. Each involved a young woman who had reported feeling watched before ultimately disappearing. The files were meticulously organized, with psychological profiles, behavioral analysis, and theoretical frameworks for understanding the perpetrator's methodology. One case study stood out immediately. 3 years earlier, in Portland, Oregon, a graduate student named Lyrics Nightshade had disappeared under remarkably similar circumstances. Like SEOIN, Lyrics had sent a final text message, "Someone's outside, I'm scared." Her apartment had shown no signs of forced entry, and she had been experiencing feelings of being watched for weeks before her disappearance. Did SEOIN ever mention receiving any contact from these other cases? Minjun asked, flipping through the files. Dr. Morse shook his head. Not to me, but she was very secretive about her research methods. She believed that understanding the stalker's psychology was key to prevention. Chen's phone buzzed with an incoming call from the forensics lab. The results from SEOIN's apartment had finally come back. Technician Axel Ravencrest had found something interesting in the soil from the overturned plant. "We found foreign DNA in the dirt," Axel reported. "Someone other than SEOIN or her roommate had contact with that plant recently. But here's where it gets strange. We also found traces of a chemical compound that's used in professional surveillance equipment." The revelation sent a chill through both detectives. This wasn't a random crime of opportunity. It was the work of someone with specialized knowledge and equipment. Chen decided to contact the Portland Police Department about the Lyrics Nightshade case. Detective Briarstone, who had worked the investigation, was eager to share information when she learned about the similarities. "We never solved Lyrics's case," Detective Stone admitted during their video conference. "But we suspected the perpetrator had law enforcement or military training. The abduction was too clean, too professional. We found evidence of electronic surveillance equipment being used near her apartment building for weeks before she disappeared." "Any suspects?" Minjun asked. "One. A former police detective named Torben Grimm. He'd been dismissed from the force 2 years earlier for inappropriate conduct involving surveillance of female colleagues. We could never prove his involvement in Lyrics's disappearance, but he left town shortly after she went missing." Chen felt his pulse quicken. Where did he go? Unknown. He seemed to vanish as completely as his victims. That evening, Chen and Minjun expanded their search to include similar cases across the country. What they discovered was terrifying. Over the past 5 years, at least 8 young women had disappeared under nearly identical circumstances. All had been graduate students. All had reported feeling watched. All had sent final text messages, expressing fear before vanishing without a trace. The pattern was becoming clear. They weren't dealing with isolated incidents. They were hunting a serial predator who moved from city to city, carefully selecting his victims and studying their routines before striking. Jung-hoon provided crucial information when he mentioned that Seo-yeon had been receiving strange phone calls in the weeks before her disappearance. She said someone would call and just breathe into the phone, he recalled. It happened maybe 4 or 5 times. She thought it might be a wrong number, but it always seemed to happen late at night. The phone records revealed the calls had come from different prepaid cell phones, each purchased with cash and used only once. The caller had been testing SEO responses, learning her patterns, and building a psychological profile. As Chen stared at the evidence board in his office that night, connected by red string and filled with photographs of missing women, he realized they were dealing with someone far more dangerous than a simple stalker. This was a predator who understood psychology, surveillance, and law enforcement procedures, someone who had been perfecting his methods with each victim. Detective Chen's investigation took a dramatic turn when the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit became involved. Special Agent Zara Nightfall arrived from Quantico with a thick file and a grim expression that suggested she'd seen this pattern before. "We've been tracking what we call the academic hunter for 3 years," Agent Nightfall explained during the task force briefing. 8 confirmed victims across 6 states, all graduate students in psychology or related fields. Your case appears to be number 9. The conference room fell silent as she displayed crime scene photos on the wall-mounted screen. Each image showed the same eerie similarities: neat apartments with subtle signs of intrusion, overturned plants or small objects knocked over during the struggle, and no evidence of forced entry. He chooses victims who are studying criminal psychology, Nightfall continued. We believe this is part of his psychological game. He wants to prove he's smarter than those who study people like him. Agent Nightfall had brought along Dr. Kyrax Shadomir, a forensic psychologist, who had been developing a profile of their suspect. Dr. Shadomir's analysis was chilling in its precision. The perpetrator exhibits characteristics of both organized and disorganized behavior, Dr. Shadomir explained. He's methodical in his selection and surveillance of victims, but the actual abductions show signs of impulsivity. This suggests someone with formal training who may be experiencing psychological deterioration. Chen leaned forward in his chair. What kind of formal training? Military, law enforcement, or private security? The surveillance techniques he employs require specialized knowledge of electronic equipment and counter-surveillance methods. Min had been quietly reviewing the case files during the presentation. Doctor, you mentioned psychological deterioration. Could you elaborate? The time between abductions has been decreasing. His first known victim, 3 years ago, was followed by a 6-month gap. The most recent cases show gaps of only 6 to 8 weeks. He's accelerating, which means he's becoming more unstable and more dangerous. The task force decided to focus on Tehran Grimm, the former Portland detective who had disappeared after Lyric's Nightshade's abduction. Agent Nightfall's team had been tracking his possible movements through credit card records, employment applications, and utility connections. He's been using multiple identities, Nightfall reported. But we've identified a pattern in his movements that corresponds with the timeline of disappearances. Chen studied the map on the wall, noting the red pins marking each crime location. He's moving east, staying ahead of investigations, but not randomly. There's a method to his geographic selections. The breakthrough came when Jung-hoon remembered additional details about SEO Ian's final weeks. During a follow-up interview, he mentioned that she had received a job application rejection letter that had upset her more than usual. She applied for a research assistant position with some private consulting firm, Jung-hoon recalled. When they rejected her, she said something about the interviewer giving her creepy vibes. She thought he asked too many personal questions about her living situation. Chen and Minjun immediately requested the letter. The consulting firm was called Behavioral Insights Solutions, and their letter had listed an address in the downtown business district. When they arrived at the building, they discovered the office space had been rented for only 3 weeks, exactly the time frame when SEO Yan had been experiencing increased feelings of being watched. The building's security footage from the rental period had been mysteriously corrupted, but the property manager remembered the tenant, a middle-aged man with graying hair who paid 3 months' rent in advance with cash. He said he was starting a new consulting business, the manager explained. Seemed professional enough, but there was something off about him. He kept asking about the other tenants, wanted to know about the building's security systems. Agent Nightfall's team ran the rental agreement through their database and found fingerprints that matched Torben Grimm. They finally had physical evidence placing their primary suspect in the area during the time of SCOIN's disappearance. He's been using the fake consulting firm as a way to interview potential victims, Dr. Shadomir concluded. It gives him access to personal information, living situations, and psychological profiles. He's turned the job interview process into a hunting ground. The investigation team realized they needed to work quickly. If Dr. Shadomir's analysis was correct about the accelerating timeline, Grimm would likely be selecting his next victim soon. They began monitoring job application websites and consulting firms in neighboring cities, hoping to intercept him before he could claim another victim. Chen couldn't shake the feeling that SCOIAN might still be alive. Unlike the other cases, they had found her phone and personal belongings. The other victims' phones had never been recovered, suggesting they had been taken with them. This deviation from his established pattern might mean something significant. He's keeping her, Chen told Minjun, as they reviewed the evidence late that night. The question is why, and more importantly, where. The discovery of SCOIN's location came through an unexpected source, utility records, cross-referenced with Torben Grimm's known aliases. Agent Nightfall's technical team had been monitoring unusual electricity usage patterns in rural areas, looking for properties that showed sudden increases in power consumption, a sign that someone might be maintaining a hidden facility. Detective Chen received the call at 3:17 a.m. "We found it." Agent Nightfall's voice crackled through his phone. "Rural property about 40 miles north of the city. Registered under the name Zarian Blackthorn, another alias we've linked to Grimm. Satellite imagery shows recent construction of what appears to be an underground bunker. The task force assembled before dawn. SWAT teams, FBI agents, and local law enforcement converged on the remote property nestled deep in the Cascade foothills. The main house was a modest two-story structure, but thermal imaging revealed extensive underground construction beneath and behind the building." Chen's heart pounded as they approached the property through the early morning mist. After 6 weeks of investigation, they were finally closing in on their suspect. But the question that haunted him was whether they would find SCOIAN alive. The raid began at 6 a.m. sharp. The house appeared empty, but the team's attention quickly focused on a concealed entrance. They found in the basement a heavy steel door hidden behind a false wall. Beyond it lay a staircase, descending into what could only be described as a predator's lair. The underground facility was a maze of reinforced concrete rooms, each serving a specific purpose in Grimm's twisted operation. The first room contained sophisticated surveillance equipment, monitors, recording devices, and detailed maps of college campuses across the region. Photographs of young women covered the walls, not just his victims, but dozens of potential targets he had been studying. Agent Nightfall directed Chen's attention to a series of files, organized in metal cabinets. Each file contained exhaustive information about the women Grimm had been stalking: class schedules, home addresses, family information, psychological profiles, and recordings of phone conversations. The level of detail was staggering and deeply disturbing. "He's been building dossiers on these women for months before taking them," Nightfall observed. "This isn't impulsive behavior, it's methodical hunting." They found SCOIAN in the facility's third room, alive, but in critical condition. She was unconscious, connected to an IV drip, lying on a hospital-style bed in what appeared to be a makeshift medical facility. Dr. Kirak Shadomir, who had accompanied the raid team, immediately began assessing her condition. "She's been sedated for an extended period," Dr. Shadomir reported. "Pulse is weak, but stable. We need to get her to a hospital immediately." Chen felt a mixture of relief and rage as paramedics carefully moved SCOIAN onto a stretcher. She was alive. but the psychological trauma she had endured would require extensive treatment and support. The facility revealed the full scope of Grimm's operation. In addition to SEO Yan, they discovered evidence that at least 3 other victims had been held in the underground complex. Personal belongings, identification documents, and disturbing video recordings suggested that Grimm had been keeping his victims for extended periods before ultimately disposing of them. "Where is he?" Minjun asked, scanning the empty rooms with growing frustration. Their answer came from the facility's final room, which contained Grimm's living quarters. The space was spartanly furnished but contained detailed escape plans, multiple sets of identification documents, and a large amount of cash. Most disturbing was a journal in which Grimm had documented his psychological evolution from stalker to serial abductor. One entry, dated just 3 days earlier, provided crucial insight into his state of mind. The research subject has provided valuable data about fear responses and psychological adaptation to captivity. However, the authorities are closing in. Time to relocate the operation and begin the final phase. Agent Nightfall's team found evidence that Grimm had left the facility approximately 24 hours before the raid. Tire tracks led to a service road that connected to the main highway system, suggesting he had anticipated their arrival and made his escape. "He's running, but he won't go far," Chen told his partner as they surveyed the abandoned facility. This place represented years of work for him. Losing it will destabilize him, make him more likely to make mistakes. The team discovered that Grimm had been communicating with someone through encrypted messages found on a hidden computer server. The messages suggested he had an accomplice, someone who had been helping him monitor law enforcement activities and stay ahead of investigations. As Coion was rushed to the hospital, Chen realized their work was far from over. They had rescued one victim and uncovered crucial evidence, but Torben Grimm was still free, and his psychological profile suggested he would likely escalate his behavior in response to losing his primary facility. The investigation had entered its most dangerous phase. They were no longer hunting a methodical predator who operated from the shadows. They were pursuing a cornered animal who had nothing left to lose. Coin regained consciousness 3 days after her rescue, her memory fragmented but gradually returning. Detective Chen sat beside her hospital bed as she struggled to piece together the nightmare she had endured. Her first coherent words sent shockwaves through the investigation team. "There were 2 of them," she whispered, her voice hoarse from weeks of sedation. "The older man who took me, and someone else. Someone who visited regularly." Dr. Kyrak Shadomir had prepared Chen for the possibility that Coin's memories might be unreliable due to prolonged drugging, but her account was remarkably detailed and consistent. She described her abductor as methodical and calculating, someone who seemed to view her as a research subject rather than a person. "He called me Subject 7, Coin recalled, trembling as the memories surfaced. He would ask me questions about fear, about how my psychology studies had prepared me for captivity. It was like he was conducting some kind of twisted experiment. But it was her description of the second person that changed everything. Younger, maybe early 30s. Asian features, spoke with a slight accent. He seemed to be taking notes during the ... sessions, like he was learning from the older man. Agent Nightfall immediately pulled Chen into the hallway. "We need to review everyone who had access to information about this investigation," she said, grimly. "If Grimm has someone on the inside, it explains how he stayed ahead of us for so long." The task force began a comprehensive review of everyone who had been involved in the case. Phone records, email communications, and access logs were scrutinized for any signs of information leakage. The process was tense and uncomfortable, as colleagues began viewing each other with suspicion. The breakthrough came when Minjun discovered discrepancies in the evidence database. Someone had been accessing case files outside of normal working hours, downloading information about surveillance techniques and psychological profiles. The computer logs revealed the access had been occurring for weeks, always late at night when the building was mostly empty. The login credentials belonged to Dr. Kellen Morse, Minjun reported during the emergency task force meeting. SEO academic advisor, Agent Nightfall, coordinated with university security to review surveillance footage from Dr. Morse's office building. What they found was damning. The professor had been meeting regularly with an unidentified man in his office. After hours, the man matched SCOIN's description of Grimm's accomplice. Chen felt sick as the realization set in. Dr. Morse had been feeding information to Grimm from the beginning, providing details about the investigation's progress and helping his partner stay ahead of law enforcement efforts. The arrest of Dr. Morse took place at his home just before midnight. The professor showed no surprise when FBI agents surrounded his house, almost as if he had been expecting them. During the initial interview, he maintained his innocence, but his resolve quickly crumbled when confronted with the evidence. "You don't understand," Dr. Morse finally admitted. "Torben isn't just a criminal, he's a revolutionary. His research into fear psychology and behavioral control has applications that could transform our understanding of human nature." Chen stared at the professor in disgust. "He's a serial killer who's been torturing innocent women. He's been conducting groundbreaking research into terror responses and psychological adaptation," Dr. Morse countered. The subjects he selected were psychology students who could provide valuable data about their own mental states during controlled stress situations. Agent Nightfall leaned across the interview table. "Where is he now?" Dr. Morse's expression grew defiant. "Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. You're terminating research that could revolutionize criminal psychology and trauma therapy." The search of Dr. Morse's home and office revealed extensive documentation of his collaboration with Grimm. They had been planning to publish their research as a groundbreaking study in criminal psychology, using the data collected from their victims' suffering. Chen discovered that Dr. Morse had been Grimm's conduit to the academic world, helping him identify potential victims and providing psychological profiles that made the stalking process more efficient. The professor had even helped design the underground facility's layout to maximize psychological impact on the captives. "He's been manipulating graduate students for years," Agent Nightfall realized as they reviewed Dr. Morse's files, recommending certain students for research positions, steering them toward specific areas of study, all to make them more attractive targets for Grimm. The investigation revealed that Dr. Morse had been in contact with Grimm for over 4 years, beginning their collaboration after meeting at an academic conference on criminal behavior. What had started as intellectual discussions about the psychology of fear had evolved into active participation in abduction and torture. SEOIN's case had been different, because she had begun to suspect her advisor's involvement. Her research into stalking behaviors had led her to recognize patterns in her own experience that matched the cases she was studying. Dr. Morse had realized she was becoming suspicious and had accelerated the timeline for her abduction. "She was going to expose us," Dr. Morse admitted during his second interview. "Her research was too thorough, too insightful. She was connecting dots that we thought were well hidden." With Dr. Morse in custody, the task force finally had real-time intelligence about Grimm's possible whereabouts. Phone records revealed recent communications between the two men, including references to a contingency site in the mountains where Grimm planned to continue his work. Chen knew they were closing in on their target, but he also understood that Grimm would be more dangerous than ever, having lost both his primary facility and his academic collaborator. The serial predator would likely make increasingly desperate and violent choices. The contingency site that Dr. Morse reluctantly revealed was an abandoned mining facility deep in the Cascade Mountains. 3 hours northeast of the city, Torben Grimm had purchased the property under another alias 2 years earlier, apparently as part of his long-term operational planning. Detective Chen stared at the satellite images spread across the tactical planning table, noting the isolated location and difficult terrain. The facility consisted of several surface buildings connected to an extensive network of underground tunnels, a perfect hiding place for someone who understood surveillance and counter-surveillance techniques. He chose this location for multiple reasons, Agent Nightfall explained to the assembled task force. Remote enough to avoid detection, but with multiple escape routes through the tunnel system. If he's still following his psychological pattern, he may have other victims held there. The assault team included FBI tactical specialists, local SWAT units, and specialized cave rescue personnel familiar with underground operations. Dr. Karax Shadamir accompanied the team to provide psychological insights that might help predict Grimm's behavior during the confrontation. SEO-YEON, despite her physical and emotional trauma, had insisted on participating in the operation as a consultant. Her first-hand knowledge of Grimm's methods and the layout of his facilities had proven invaluable during the planning stages. He's methodical, but he's also paranoid, she had told Chen during their preparation meeting. He'll have escape routes planned, but he'll also have contingencies for destroying evidence. If he thinks he's about to be captured, he might try to eliminate any witnesses. The team approached the mining facility at dawn, using the early morning mist as natural cover. Thermal imaging revealed heat signatures in at least 3 different underground locations, suggesting Grimm was not alone at the site. Chen's radio crackled with updates from the perimeter teams as they established positions around the facilities. Multiple entrances. Thermal signature suggests at least 4 individuals in the main underground complex, the surveillance coordinator reported. Movement patterns indicate one may be restrained. The primary assault began with simultaneous entries through the facility's main building and 2 secondary access points. Chen followed the FBI tactical team through the main entrance, his weapon drawn and adrenaline surging as they descended into Grimm's final stronghold. The underground complex was even more extensive than the previous facility, with multiple levels connected by narrow tunnels and reinforced chambers. The team moved methodically through the maze, clearing each room and documenting evidence of Grimm's activities. They found the first victim in a chamber on the facility's second level, a young woman named Zarabeth Thornfield, a graduate student from a university in neighboring Washington state. She had been reported missing 6 weeks earlier. Like SEO Yan, she was alive but heavily sedated and in need of immediate medical attention. Subject 9. Agent Nightfall read from a file they discovered near Zarabeth's holding cell. He's been continuing his research, even after losing his primary facility. The confrontation with Grimm came in the facility's deepest chamber, a large room that served as his command center and personal quarters. Chen kicked open the reinforced door to find the serial predator, calmly destroying computer files and research documentation. "You're too late," Grimm said, without looking up from his work. "Years of groundbreaking research, and you're destroying it all because of your narrow-minded inability to understand scientific progress." Chen kept his weapon trained on the man who had terrorized so many victims. "Step away from the computer and put your hands where I can see them." Grimm turned slowly, his eyes cold and calculating even in defeat. "Do you have any idea what you've cost humanity? The insights we've gained into fear psychology, trauma response, and behavioral adaptation could have revolutionized criminal justice and psychiatric treatment. What you've done is torture and murder innocent women," Chen replied, his voice steady despite his anger. The serial predator smiled with disturbing calm. "Every great scientific advance requires sacrifice. Those women contributed to something larger than their individual lives." Agent Nightfall moved to secure the computer equipment, while Chen maintained his position. "Torben Grimm, you're under arrest for kidnapping, assault, and murder. You have the right to remain silent." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Grimm made one final statement that chilled everyone in the room. "This research will continue. There are others who understand the importance of what we've accomplished. You've captured one facility, but the methodology survives." The search of the mining facility revealed evidence linking Grimm to 12 confirmed abductions over a 4-year period. In addition to SEOIO and Zarabeth, they recovered personal belongings and identification documents from victims across multiple states. Chen found Grimm's detailed research journal in the command center's final room. The document contained hundreds of pages of observations, psychological profiles, and experimental data collected from his victims. The level of scientific detachment with which he described their suffering was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire investigation. 3 weeks later, Chen visited Seoion at the rehabilitation facility where she was recovering. Her physical condition had improved dramatically, but the psychological healing would take much longer. "I keep thinking about what he said," she told Chen during their conversation, "about the research continuing. Do you think there are others like him out there?" Chen considered his response carefully. "There probably are, but we know how to recognize the patterns now. Your case has taught us how these predators operate, how they select their victims, and how they try to stay ahead of investigations. That knowledge will help us protect other potential victims." Seoion nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Then maybe something good can come from what happened to all of us." 6 months later, both Torben Grimm and Dr. Kellen Morse were convicted on multiple federal charges. Grimm received life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Dr. Morse was sentenced to 25 years for his role in the conspiracy. The case had ended, but Chen knew the investigation had revealed something larger and more disturbing than a single predator's crimes. It had exposed how academic institutions, professional expertise, and scientific methodology could be corrupted and weaponized by those with malicious intent. As he filed his final report on the case, Chen couldn't shake the memory of Grimm's final words. Somewhere out there, other predators might be studying these methods, learning from these patterns, and preparing to continue the research that had cost so many innocent lives. The hunt for Seoion had ended successfully, but Chen understood that the broader fight against such predators would continue for as long as human evil sought to disguise itself as scientific progress.